we can fight back by saying, okay, you know what, Nazis are not actually something that we want to do. I had family members that died in World War II. I'm not going to be sitting there, praising the mustached guy.
We should probably get started on Gender Critical Story Hour here in a minute. For those of you who are new to Gender Critical Story Hour, the idea is that we bring stories about embodiment and growth and maturation into healthy adults. Last week, I read the story Many Moons by James Thurber. And then Staunch Woman, who is not here, but who is a staunch fan, read Little Red Riding Hood version. That was good. It was a good show. So we're going to try and do another Gender Critical Story Hour now.
All right. Hello, everyone. So last week we talked a bit about, apart from those that Matt discussed, I mentioned Silence of the Lambs. And so, which, is a wonderful children's story, right? Just kidding. Um, but but we talked a bit about the notion of people, and particularly men, wanting to wear other people's skin, right? Another one of those great childhood story themes. And so what I was thinking about was the work of Shel Silverstein. And so the poem that I had come across a little while back was a poem that he wrote called Skin Stealer. And it is about a creature that takes somebody's skin and wears it. And it it stands out clearly among the very like kid friendly kind of poems. And one of the interesting things about Silverstein too, just as an introduction to him before we read from Skin Stealer, is he's mostly known for The Giving Tree, which many people know from having been little and having read The Giving Tree. And critiques of it usually emphasize how dark it actually is, in that it's a sadistic and masochistic relationship between the boy and the tree. That he's constantly taking parts, pieces from the tree until there's nothing left, and then the tree is just destroyed, and the boy has all that he presumably needs, and probably still wants more afterward. So it is not. I mean, it's been perceived in positive terms by most people who still like give it to their kids and are like, "Oh, look at how cute this is," but they do not really think about what it teaches. That it does teach certain dynamics of sadism and masochism wrapped up in a story, wrapped up in a cute little story. But without further ado, this evening I unzipped my skin and carefully unscrewed my head, exactly as I always do when I prepare myself for bed. And while I slept, a cuckoo came, as naked as could be, and put on the skin and screwed on the head that once belonged to me. Now, wearing my feet, he runs through the street in a most disgraceful way, doing things and saying things I'd never do or say, tickling the children and kicking the men and dancing the ladies away. So if he makes your bright eyes cry or makes your poor head spin, that scoundrel you see is not really me. He's the cuckoo who's wearing my skin. And there are two other poems that I want to read, because I thought they were very sweet. There was one called In Search of Cinderella, which I think is very applicable here, and then I'll read one more. So In Search of Cinderella says, from dusk to dawn, from town to town, without a single clue, I seek the tender, slender foot to fit this crystal shoe. From dusk to dawn, I try it on each damsel that I meet, and I still love her so, but oh, I've started hating feet. So, you have the prince going after the perfect foot, right? Going after that ideal, and over time becoming persuaded against feet, which is kind of like a reverse of Freud's discussion of fetishism. He talks about the foot, and it's like over time, after going from foot to foot, he hates feet. If any of you have looked up Silence of the Lambs, they the writers for them, they have put, they sometimes have a note that talks about how, oh well, the Silence of the Lambs has been criticized for its negative portrayals of transsexualism or whatnot, something like that. And and it was interesting, I think on one of the Wikipedia entries it had a question mark, and it said like, by who, criticized by who. Because people will put like, it has been criticized by, and then the one of the notes said it was criticized by gay activists in the 90s for its portrayal of transsexualism, and it was actually not. Gay activists like didn't give a shit about the portrayal in Silence of the Lambs. And the other thing about the portrayal in the film, just to go on to Silence of the Lambs a little bit relative to Skin Stealer, is it has that moment where Clarice Starling says, that, oh, well, but we know that even though transsexualism has been associated with acts of violence, or that people have said that it is, no studies have really proven that there's a correlation or there's any kind of connection between the men who are claiming that they want to be women and acts of violence or potentially violent attitudes toward women in their lives. um, that actually appears in the film. And if you look at the readings, like the popular readings of Silence of the Lambs from trans activists, what I have noticed in what they've said is, well, actually, James Gum was only violent because he was denied his right to gender affirming care. And I just think, wow, that is absolutely dumb.
Donovan, thank you so much. That has been so entertaining. That was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Children need to learn that the universe has entropy, and it's a dark place full of horrible people who want to hurt you. Um, not everyone wants to hurt you, but there are monsters out there, right? You have to beware the monsters. So there's this sense in which a poem or a story for a child sometimes does get dark. And the Giving Tree is controversial because of its sexed relationship, right? The tree is female. But to me, the tree, the title is The Giving Tree. And we all know that trees don't feel. They don't think. They don't have any thoughts about whether the boy chops them up and turns them into a boat or sits on them later or not. Spoiler alert. So to me, just my interpretation is that this is about a man consuming his own lifespan, the Giving Tree. That our life is something that gives to us until it's exhausted. That's just, what I took from it.
I think on the one hand, like when you read it outside of the context of like, like you say, reading it outside of, okay, well, this is it's gendered the way that it is, like that it actually ascribes to, the tree, like the tree is female, the boy is male, who grows up again. When you read it outside of that, you can be like, oh well, he's been bound to this thing that he's used and used and used, and it's gone his whole life. But of course, the addition there is, once recognizing that thing that he sees in terms of its usefulness happens to be female, and then it's like, okay, well, that clicks, because so the way Silverstein was in his everyday life, in like, frequenting the Playboy Mansion, in going to, the Playboy clubs. That once you have that added context, then you're like, like, that was how I felt, at least when I was like, 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 there's some sweet poems, but then I'm just like, like, I had to think about how he's not that great. But yeah, that was all I was gonna say too, because I left out some of the bio info that I was gonna mention because I forgot to say the Playboy stuff that I just thought was really fascinating, because I had not known about Silverstein and his connection to like going to Playboy a lot. So yeah.